we're going to be talking about an Iranian weightlifter who has been banned from all sports for the rest of his life.
That's right. Yeah. His name is Mustafa Rajaei, and he was handed a lifetime ban by the Iranian regime for simply shaking the hand of his Israeli counterpart.
Yeah, exactly.
So this happened this week. It happened at a championships in Poland. Rajaei shook the hands of Israeli weightlifter Maxim Svirsky, and this was just as they were standing in front of or behind the podium, the medal podium. I believe the Israeli weightlifter got third and the Iranian got second. We've actually got a video clip of it on our social media channels. And it was all very done with a lot of mutual respect. The two of them seemed quite comfortable. It was initiated by the Israeli, but both of them were standing together, and it all seemed very pleasant and good sportsmanship, as it should be, as there are a number of countries represented at this championship, the World Masters Championship. But then word got to the Iranian regime, and not only has Mustafa been banned and kicked out of the Iranian national weightlifting team, but he has been banned from every sports facility in Iran. Yeah. I mean, it is shocking. Yeah. He can't even enter a gym.
I know. It's crazy. I mean, like, putting it simply, this is a very simple act of good sportsmanship, and he is being punished for the rest of his life. Yeah. And it's a simple handshake. And I think, obviously, the Iranian regime is trying to send a message here. They're trying to ensure that their athletes never respect or honour any Israeli athlete. Because the reason for this is because, from what I've read in the past, basically, if the Iranian regime, if an athlete acknowledges an Israeli athlete, it is the equivalent of, this is how the Iranian regime see it, the equivalent of them recognizing Israel's existence. And that's one thing they never want to do, because they are hell-bent, unfortunately, on trying to wipe out Israel. And it's just it's an eye-opening story, because it is. Just think about that, like two people showing good sportsmanship, and one of them has his whole career ruined, his whole life ruined. I mean, he may even be under threat.
Both of them showed good sportsmanship. And this is actually the thing which the Iranian regime would not like to hear.
No.
And that is that many Iranian, I don't know how many, but there are more than they realize, are actually welcome the opportunity to compete alongside and with Israelis, and actually have no problem shaking the hands of their Israeli opponents. They don't mind. And we know that because there are a few other stories which have demonstrated that. So actually, this isn't necessarily representative of all Iranian sports people.
No.
The Iranian regime is once again behind the times in recognizing the state of Israel, recognizing the will of its own people. So, this is shocking. It is disrespectful. They're using sport also as a platform, as so many dictatorial regimes tend to do, is use sport as the platform in which they show this passive aggression towards a country, in this case the state of Israel. And it really is appalling. I don't think the Federation, the International Wrestling Federation, not International Wrestling, whatever the federation is called for the weightlifting, has taken any action. But I certainly hope that the governing sporting bodies really do take some strong action. We've of course got an Olympic Games coming up next year in Paris, and it would be, I think, certainly a worthwhile effort. I'm not saying to kick Iran out, because I believe that Iranian competitors who, as individuals, it is fair that they have an opportunity to compete. But I think there needs to be a strong message, because the Iranian regime is so entwined with its sporting bodies. So they'll get the message if it do so. But it looks like nothing has been said at the moment. So you're going to say?
I was going to say, basically, we have to be clear here. This is the Iranian regime, not the Iranian people.
Absolutely, yes.
The thing is, the majority, or maybe not the majority, but there's a lot of Iranian people who want their country to be more like Western civilization, because that's how it was back in the 1970s. There's a lot of protests against the regime. There's a lot of people who actually would be okay with normalizing ties with Israel.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the regime doesn't speak for its people. There is a small minority at the top who is controlling everything that the Iranian people do, and it is destroying those people's lives. And so, again, this is one of those things where, unfortunately, Iranian athletes are forced against their will to not even compete against Israelis. I mean, I'm even surprised he was allowed to compete against the Israeli, let alone sort of shake his hands.
There's tremendous... he did. When you say he competed, obviously with the weightlifting, it's a competition, but they're not facing one another in sort of a, like, I don't know, wrestling
judo
or something like that. They're competing against. But you're quite right. This is from the very top, the Iranian regime, which is anti-Semitic. This can only be, or I think should be viewed as anti-Semitism from the Iranian regime, not from the Iranian competitor, because he showed friendliness towards the Israeli. But let's also take into account the amount of pressure which is upon these Iranian competitors, because over time there have been story after story of Iranian sports people that have either pulled out of competitions, they've either blanked their Israeli opponent and refused to shake hands, and I mean, there's even one story. This was back in 2018 of an Iranian judo participant at a Grand Slam in Germany. He disqualified himself by being overweight in the weigh-in so that he wouldn't face an Israeli opponent. He literally deliberately put on weight so that he couldn't compete. And so then he wasn't able to compete because he didn't reach that limit, and so he was disqualified. I mean, the fact that, and that's the pressure. That's imagine the amount of pressure. And then we have the story of a former world judo champion. His name was Saeed Malai, and he was competing in a tournament where throughout the tournament, the Iranian authorities were pressuring him to withdraw, to basically deliberately lose so that he wouldn't face an Israeli, and he defied it all the way until he came to the semi-final, and there was an Israeli in the final whose name was Sagi Muki, and he was as I say, he would have faced him in the final had he won that semi-final, and he deliberately lost. Do you remember that?
So I remember watching it at the time when it happened, and people were sort of mocking him because he had clearly thrown the match. It was very obvious to the judo professionals that he was throwing the match there on purpose, and so there was this kind of feeling of insult to him. When actually the real reason, I think, was far more sinister, really, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Well, he had pressure from Iran's deputy sports minister, and just before he was about to go to take the platform for that semi-final, he had the Iranian Olympic Committee president tell him just minutes before the match that Iranian security services were at his parents' house in Tehran.
Yeah, crazy. Just think about that.
Yeah.
It's a sports match.
If you don't pull this match, if you don't fake the defeat, then, we're at your parents' house.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely... It's evil. There's no other way of putting it. This is sport is meant to be something which unites people together.
Yes.
Athletes are not meant to be dealing with politics like this. And yet the Iranian regime has purposely made it so that they will attack Israel on every account, including within sports.
Yeah.
And actually the real victims in this is not Israel. Israel isn't... I mean, Sagi Muki won gold because he didn't have to face the Iranian, right? And so the Israeli didn't get a disadvantage from that, but the Iranian athlete did because of his own government, because of his own regime.
And not only that, but he had to flee the country. Or
he chose to flee the country,
He fled to Germany.
Yep.
He got refugee status.
Yep.
And then he got permission to get Mongolian citizenship.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually entered the Olympic Games with permission of the International Olympic Committee.
Yeah.
Not representing Iran.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful thing because after this incident, Saeed and Sagi actually formed a close friendship.
Yeah, they did.
And Saeed even flew to Tel Aviv to play in... not to play, to compete in the Judo Grand Slam there in Tel Aviv against Sagi.
Yeah.
So the two met,
Yep.
Competed against one another, and they formed a friendship. And actually, Saeed had lots of pleasant things to say about Israel and about his opponent. And then you began to see his true character, his true feelings towards Israel.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the important things we just touched on, and I think it reaffirms it, that actually once that pressure is removed, the feelings of the mutual feelings of respect and of love and of friendship are there. They're under the surface.
Yeah.
But it's being it's being quashed by or suppressed by a totalitarian regime.
Yeah, and by hatred. And I think that's the thing, especially with sports, when it's contact sports, physical sports against each other, there is a real camaraderie between the athletes who compete in those sports, because ultimately you're fighting each other for real. You're properly competing against each other. And so to see both Sagi Muki and also Saeed Malay have that friendship and that bond, it's like a deep bond that you form just from fighting each other, sort of thing. And
social media got to see it all played out as well. Lots of photos of selfies of the two of them with arms around one another. Yep. The Iranian regime must have had a day off Twitter.
I know.
I think.
And I think Saeed Malay actually won as well. And so if you think about that matchup, he was a judo champion for Iran. He is now a judo champion for Morocco. Is it Morocco?
Sorry, Saeed.
Saeed. And so Mongolia. That's the one. Sorry, not Morocco.
That's okay.
And as a result, the International Judo Federation actually issued a 4-year ban against Iran. So basically, from this one action, the Iranian regime hindered its own people, its own athletes, for 4 years.
Yes.
And lost a world champion as a result of this because of their hatred of Israel. Yeah. Just shows that hating Israel, it just hurts yourself. It doesn't hurt Israel, it hurts themselves.